And it's about time to start up. Let me mention as we get started here, and I know I've said this several times before, but that said, if you have not done so, please make sure this is for everybody in the class. Sign up for the Ranking Connection that is online. And when you do that, you're able to tell the kind of jobs that you're interested in, and you will get messages. All right. Sometimes these actually appear here before they do on Indeed and Monster and other places, because there are a lot of companies that have really good relationships with Rankin. The other thing I'd say about that too, and again, this is for everybody in the class. If you are going to graduate in December, and I know at least one of you is not, but if you are going to graduate in December, you should be sending out resumes already. All right. That's the end of my sermon. I wanted to say that just because I think at least it's important to be said. All right. So today is day 53. The idea today is what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring up the different stuff that's in here from the Sports Pro case study. Now, what most of you did, and I did the same thing, so I'm not being critical, but what most of us did was we kept working on the same copy. So in other words, I put in the stuff for chapter 6, then I put in the stuff for chapter 7, etc. Now, at least one person in here was probably a little wiser in what they did, was they did chapter 6, saved it, and pushed it out to GitHub. Then they did chapter 7, etc. So the reason I'm telling you that is the copy that I'm going to show right now is through 12.2. So it's virtually got all of the changes in it. All right. The plan next week is we're going to start right away on our project, right away on Monday. And depending on how much I get done as far as trying to complete this thing on the weekend, in an ideal world at least, we'll work on it on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, and even if necessary, on Friday. Now, I do want to mention to you, some of this I probably have said already, but again, I'm trying to be complete here. So let me make this a little bigger and write this down so you can all see it. All right, the weekend of Thanksgiving. So Monday, 11/20, Tuesday, 11/21, Wednesday, 11/22. I am off those days. All right. And I think I mentioned this before, but in case I did not, we get PTO, which is paid time off based on the number of hours that you put in. Well, I still had about 90 hours of PTO for 2022, not 2023, 2022. So I was able to roll 1 week's worth of those over 37 and a half hours. I was able to roll over. All right. That still left me with a lot of time. So I'm taking off these days here. And in addition, I will also not be in for Friday, 12/1, Friday, 12/8, and Friday, 12/15. Now, you might think that's unfair or whatever, and of course, that's your right. All right. It's my own ignorance that I didn't take this stuff earlier, but I didn't take this stuff earlier. Now, on these days, by and large, I'll still be around. I'll be on. All right. I can't, if it's a Friday afternoon and my wife says, hey, you're off, we're doing this, okay. But either in the morning or in the afternoon or both, I will at least be checking my emails regularly. Same thing in here. All right. I mean, just so you're aware of what's going on. All right. Now, many people had emailed me this week. The good news is everybody in this class turned me in something for the Sports Pro through Chapter 12. It may work, it may not work. All right. But if you gave it the old college try, so to speak, even if yours does not totally work, you will get most of the points. I can't tell you how many until this weekend when I go in and grade these. All right. And then you'll know. All right. Finally, again, as it says, there'll be no class tomorrow because of the Veterans Day observance. Okay. So with that said, here it is. This is Murock's version. All right. Now, again, a couple of you emailed me and said, my stuff was working until I put in the stuff for Chapter 12. And then it stopped working. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to show you all of the code. That's literally all I have planned today. If we do this in an hour, we're done in an hour. All right. And I know I'd mentioned this the other day. I do have an appointment with my doctor because I have a recurring medical problem, but I can't get in until a week from Tuesday. All right. And that's why if it seems like this week has been a little slow, it's really because it has been. All right. The plan, though, is to work on our project all next week. When you see the project, you might say, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. I didn't. You're going to. You're going to take what we create together, kind of tear it apart, and put it back together again. And if that doesn't make sense, hopefully at least, it will make sense come next week. And if it doesn't, you will let me know. All right. And then when we get done, when we get done with the Thanksgiving break, that next week on that Monday, probably Monday and Tuesday, we're going to be working on authorization or authentication and authorization. And you will be adding that as well to your final project. All right. But we will look at that and we will add authorization and authentication to the bookstore app that we worked at. We'll do that the first week that we get back. All right. And we'll see how long that takes. If we do it in a period or two, great. All right. Then probably the next week, which is like the first week in December. All right. That's the week of the 4th. What we're going to go through together is we're going to try to take the bookstore project, all right, and we're going to try to put it out to the internet using Microsoft Azure. Hopefully, we'll all get it to work. And hopefully, if any of us have problems, it's me and not you. This is free, all right? But what I'm going to ask after we do that is that you continue working on your final project. Your final project will be due Wednesday, all right, not the last day of class, because there's just not going to be enough time to look through it, but Wednesday, the 21st, okay, by midnight. There'll be no official class Thursday, the 22nd. I'm at least planning on having all grades in by that day. All right, so you'll know exactly how you've done. All right, well, there'll be more on that as we go on. So I'm going to start this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this kind of the way we typically do projects. Now, when you look at this, all right, when you look at this, what you'll notice in here is we've got a folder for view models that's not even connected to models, just a folder for view models. Our models has just in it both our models, 5 or 6 of them, and that check.cs. Then we've got, of course, our migrations folder, but we've got a data layer folder. And in that data layer folder, as you can see, it has in it, all right, a configuration folder with our configuration files. All right. And it's got our seed data in it. All right. And that data layer also contains our repositories. All right. Our interfaces for the repository, our Sports Pro unit. All right. Our Sports Pro context, our interface for our Sports Pro unit, and our query options. When we do our project together, I tried as much as I possibly could to simplify this. So what I have done is I put everything in models. Now, why'd you do that? Because I want you to rip it apart and kind of put it back together using a format more similar to this. So you get practice doing it in your own project. All right. Now, I went online over the weekend and I started to look through some stuff and I said, okay, I kind of understand why you'd want repositories. I know why you want interfaces. And if you don't, typically C# is one of those kinds of programming languages that only allows you to inherit from one class. But C# is also one of those programming languages that allows you to implement as many interfaces as you want to. But I mean, I started to look at it and it's like, okay, with these repositories and these interfaces, why do you even do it? I mean, we haven't done it before now, all right? Really, up until we got to a later chapter in the book, we probably went through the first 10 or so chapters or something like that and didn't even use it. So when I went online and I looked to see what what they recommended or what they meaning people online said why you would do this. All right. And they came up with about 5 or 6 reasons. So I'm going to I don't have it written down or anything, but I'm just going to kind of share them with you. All right. The first reason is a separation of concern. All right. And we have talked about this many times over many different things in software. This started when you think about it. We had a separation of concerns between HTML and CSS and JavaScript. But we've also talked about having a separation of concerns among other things. All right, different parts of an application should have their own responsibilities. That's carried on into this class because virtually all semester we've used the model view controller architecture where we're doing the same thing. But the idea with interfaces and repositories is what we're doing is we are using the interfaces and mainly the repositories to separate the data access logic from the business logic. All right. We have spent much of this semester putting much of our business logic in the controller, which, as you know, isn't really the best place to do it. When you look in here under the models, and we've got that check thing that's in there, that's one of the first times, not the first, but one of the first times, we've done it a couple of other times, that we put business logic, all right, in our model. All right. What this is supposed to do in an ideal world, at least, is it's supposed to make what you're working with easier to maintain and easier to test. All right. We have not really done anything with tests in here. I went back and asked Evan. He has not ever, to my knowledge, gone over chapter 14 on tests. I looked at some of the stuff that was in there and talked about writing unit tests and the like. And I thought, well, that's going to be just another way for me to screw with people, not on purpose, but to have something that we would set up that either wouldn't work or would half-assed work. So I said, forget it. We're just not going to do it. And like I said, he hadn't been doing it either. All right. We've talked about dependency injection. All right. And you've used dependency injection all over the place this semester. So for instance, if I come in, let's see if I can find one here. I don't want to use a repository. Let me go in and look at, how do I want to do this? Let's go into a controller. Yeah. All right. So we've done this all semester. We've normally called this context or something like that. All right. But what you're doing in this code right here is you're doing or utilizing dependency injection. You're providing services and dependencies to parts of the application. All right. Now, the claim is by defining interfaces and then implementing them with the associated repositories, you can register these things and make your dependency injection that much easier to work with. All right. And again, I'm not saying, hey, that's the case. Do you agree with it or do you not agree with it? That's that's the claim. All right. Using interfaces and repositories in an ideal world, at least, is supposed to promote the idea of code reusability. You can create generic repository interfaces that you can use across different parts of an application. In an ideal world, this is going to reduce code duplication and your code will be more maintainable because there'll be less of it. All right. Again, ideally, this provides flexibility and testability. And it's the stuff we talked about earlier. All right. Repositories give you sort of a layer or a level of abstraction over your data access layer. So if you needed to, you could switch out the underlying data storage mechanism. In other words, if you decided, let's say we had done this project up until now using MySQL, and now we were going to swap that out and go to SQL Server, or vice versa. You can do that without typically having to change little to maybe even none of the code for the repository. All right. And more, you're finding that with a lot of bigger companies, they have to support multiple data sources. All right. There's even, I mean, there's all sorts of things in here. You talk about serverless types of applications, etc. All right. One idea that we have talked about in here in other classes, really from it, especially in the C# class, the AWD1115 class, once we got into classes, we talked about the idea of encapsulation. All right, and data hiding, where you have to be able to understand how to use the interface, but you don't necessarily know or have to know how to use the implementation. All right, repositories encapsulate the data access logic. All right, again, ideally it leads to cleaner code that's more maintainable. All right. The other thing they came up with doesn't really apply that much to this class, and that is that it enhances collaboration. All right. And again, as a project gets more and more complex, you can potentially have more and more people working on it, which means you're going to bust it up into parts and you'll have different people working on different parts. So those people can focus on implementing their functionality without needing, knowing how to understand, having a need to understand all of the stuff involved in the data access layer. So again, using interfaces and repositories in a C# ASP.NET application that uses Entity Framework Core and Model View Controller, all right, architectures, are supposed to improve code organization, maintainability, testability, and flexibility. So that's kind of what we're shooting for in here. So with that said, I'm going to start over here and I'm going to start with the models and I'm just going to show you everything that's in here. So those of you who had problems, again, I had emails from more than one person. I'm having problems with this. I'm having problems with this. All right. So this was that email exists. And again, the idea behind that, that's the whole thing right there. The idea behind that is we are not allowing two different customers to share the same email address. And when you think about it, that should make sense. Even if you've got customers from the same company, all right, they should have different email addresses. So probably there's nothing new in here. All right. But again, just for completeness, I wanted to bring that up. So let's take a look at our classes. So these are our model classes, which again, other than country, these are going to become our tables. All right. So country itself, every country has an ID and it has a name. We already talked about this, the fact that the ID for the country is a string. So for instance, for the United States, the country ID is US and the name is United States. All right, nothing really new there. Then we went to customers. All right. And when you look here, I went back and this is theirs. Again, they only just say required there. But you should know by now that each customer, their first name, their last name, their address, their city, their state, their postal code, and their email were all required. Most of them were a string length of size 50. All right. There were exceptions, or there was an exception, and that exception was the postal code, which was 20. All right. We also brought in country ID, and we brought that in as a foreign key, and we brought country in as a navigation property. All right. Okay. We had a regular expression for the phone number, and I already talked about the email. We also have the remote there in the email, so we're checking it right away to make sure we're not allowing the same email to be put in for two different customers. All right. Finally, as it says there down towards the bottom, we have both the navigation property. That's our linking entity. All right. So again, this is for registrations. All right. And finally, we've got the full name. Now it says read only there. All right. And hopefully everybody does realize that there is no writing that's being done there. All right. So that is what's there for the country. Incident. Incident is kind of the wild card. I think we talked about this before, because you'll notice that incident has 3 different foreign keys and 3 different navigation properties there. All right, so each incident has an ID, which again is an integer in this case, but for each incident, it must have an associated customer ID and customer, product ID and product, technician ID, and technician. By now, everybody should be familiar with, and hopefully at least somewhat comfortable with, that the reason that we're bringing in these IDs with a lot of these fields is because we're using drop-down lists. And the way that we are populating the drop-down list is actually through the ID. Now, that may not be what we're actually showing the end user, but that's how we're populating it. So we've got that for customer, we've got that for product, we've got that for technician. All right. Then we've got the title of the incident, the description of the incident, the date the incident was open, and we might as well date time dot now, and the date closed that we set to null. All right. And really in the information that we were given, I don't even know if there were any incidents that were still open in there. I don't remember. We can look in a little bit. All right. Then we had our product. And again, very similar to stuff we've done before. Each product has an integer product ID, a string product code, a string product name. Each of those two are required. All right. A yearly price that, we put in here, and basically I would not have put 0 in. I would have put something else in, but that's fine. That's what they put. All right. So we've got a range check in there, and we've got a column type check in there. All right. Then we've got a release date, which again, we are defaulting to datetime.now. And again, another one of these navigation properties to be able to link this to registration. Speaking of the devil, there's registration. Not a lot in there really. This is the one, if you remember, it had a composite primary key, sometimes called a concatenated primary key, or it even goes by other names. But it is a combination of customer ID and product ID. You need both of them, and they each, that basically they must be unique, a unique pair, or however you want to word it. All right. Then we've got customers that we're bringing in and products that we're bringing in. All right. And finally, the last thing that's in here was technicians. Again, not a lot in here. Each technician has an ID, which is an integer, strings for name, email, and phone number, each of which is required. And Grant, as always, you're the only one here, and I appreciate that. But if you have questions, or if you need me to, like, wait a minute, I want to take a look at that, leave it up there for a minute, I'll be more than happy to do so. All right. Next, let's jump into, before our data layer, let's take a look at our view models. All right. There are 4 of them in here. There is an incident list view model, an incident view model, a registration view model, and a technician view model. So here is our incident list view model. Oftentimes, most of the time, I'd say, when you've got a view model that you're going to put in the word list, you're typically, since you are printing out a list of something, it typically will be an I enumerable, as is shown right there. All right. And we've got our filtering mechanism in there as well. All right. For each individual incident, you'll notice in here that we are bringing in the other 3 tables. Well, that should make sense to you why we're doing this, because if I jump back to incident, all right, in our models, we had in here customer, we had product, we had technician. All right. And again, that's the same thing that we have here. All right. And then we've got a registration view model. Again, we just talked about this. You remember in registrations that the primary key was the composite or concatenated primary key of customer ID and product ID. All right. So we have those. Okay. Plus we bring in customer, and we've got I enumerables for lists of registrations, customers, and products. Finally, our tech incident view model here. Okay. Technician, incident, and incidents. So when we use view models, basically it's oftentimes, at least, if not always, we're using view models because we need to combine information from multiple tables. All right. Then let's go into the data layer. All right, let's do the easy stuff first. The configuration was right here. All right, I'll leave this up there for a second in case people do need it. Okay, but what we have in there is basically our relationship with a composite primary key and the one-to-many relationships, as you can see, between customer and registrations, between products and registrations. Those were the ones that we added that entity thing in there earlier. All right. Our seed data, hopefully that made sense. I'm not going to spend much time on this at all. That was our country stuff. All right, here's our customer stuff. Here's our incident stuff. Here's our product stuff. Our registration stuff. And finally, our technician stuff.
Oh, Mr. Scott.
Yes.
So I've gotten mine down to a handful of errors, and I actually have an error on each one of these seed data
Okay.
files, and it's right at the top with the iEntity type configuration. It's on that line
Right here.
6. Mine has an error on all of my files.
All right, that error, you mean that line is coming up in error or what?
Just what you have highlighted right now.
Okay. Do you have the using statements in there?
Core and metadata, yeah, I have both of those.
What does the error say?
It says, for instance, seed customers does not implement interface member iEntity type configuration customer dot configure entity type builder customer.
That's a mouthful. All right. Now, is the current repository that you have different than the one that you turned in yesterday?
It's got a little bit of changes not on these. Actually, I think I just found a typo that I had. So I
okay.
Thank you for.
Why don't you fix that and see if that fixes it?
It looks like it is on one page. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, then let's take a look at the other stuff that's in here, meaning the repositories, etc. So let's start with, let's just do them in order here. So we'll go iRepository, repository. So here's your iRepository right here. Again, if people need this, all right. And again, meant so that we're able to do our basic CRUD operations. And there's a save at the bottom. Now remember, when you set up a repository like this, I don't care about the where and whatever, but when you set up a repository, what you do in here, like they show here, is you list in there, there's really 3 things that you can put into an interface like this. All right. Number 1, the first thing you can put in, we don't use any of it, you can put in constants. Number 2, you can put in variables. And number 3, it's basically what we have in here, which are kind of stubs for functions. So in other words, everything that's in here that's shown like this, when we actually create the repository, we're going to have to account for those. All right. So again, this is not a great example of why you use repositories. All right. You typically use repositories if you want to take and combine or utilize a lot of information or similar, I guess would say a lot of information in different parts of a program. All right. Now, one thing, as an example that I've done in the past, I don't remember if I did this with you guys or not. I really don't. But one of the things that we did was when we did that payroll program, I created an interface that had all of the constants in it that were going to be used by each one when we did a program on different employee types. So we had an employee, then we had an hourly employee, we had a commission employee, etc. But we put all of the constants in one place. I mean, that's just an example of how you can use those. All right, so here's the repository, all right, that implemented the iRepository. And the idea was this was supposed to handle any kind of data. So again, we're coming in here, right here, and we're doing some dependency injection between what is here and here. And then when we actually put it in inside of our constructor. All right. Now, I don't know what you guys feel about this book. I'm not asking right now. But again, probably in about, see if today rather is day 53. So what do we have? I think that 6 weeks from today, something like that is the last day. Probably on that Monday of the last week. That's usually when they do it. You will be getting an email probably from either Ms. Bruggeman, our vice president, or from Mr. Corrigan. And they're going to ask you to do your evaluations on the course, on the book, and on the instructor. All I'm saying is be honest. But I like this book, yet I don't like this book because sometimes in here they put in things that are fairly complex and they don't really explain them. All right. I mean, I've gone back and reread the text many times and I'm like, why did you do this? All right. And they don't explain it. Now in here, they put in some comments. I think if I would have written it, I'd probably have double the comments that they have in here. That's one thing that I'm noticing, all right, that I have noticed this semester with the first year people. All right. And with you guys, I don't know if when we wrote programs together, if I wrote a lot of comments or didn't, I don't remember. But I'm finding out that as I write more and more code and we're doing things more and more as a class, it's becoming more and more important to comment. All right. So then this was the stuff that we had in there for the repository. All right. So again, as you can see, this is doing our CRUD operations right here. And then we've got this as well. All right. Then we had our Sports Pro unit. Kind of brought in all of our tables together when you look at it. All right. Yeah, a unit of work. And then when we had our Sports Pro unit in here, okay, this is where we're working with all these and we're doing the same thing virtually every time. All right. What we're saying in here is if the repository doesn't exist, create it. They're all gets. All right. And then we're just going to return it. And we do that for everyone. So products, technicians, customers, countries, incidents, registrations. I know if I didn't say it already, I know technicians, there they are. I was going to say, I know they're in here. All right. Then we went in and we had our query options. I don't have query options in the project we're going to do. All right. I don't have it in so far, and I don't see a reason to put it in. I'm hoping that when we work on this project, all right, again, which will start next week, I'm just hoping that you're just gonna say, oh, that makes sense. Okay, I see what you're saying. All right. Much of what's in here, I either took code directly out of the book or based it on code that was out of the book. All right. And again, with query options, we're coming in here. This is doing things like, again, as it says, are we filtering? Are we allowing filtering? All right. Those things with include strings where we go and we are breaking up an array, basically, or a list of things. We're breaking them up, splitting them based on a comment. All right, so we're taking a string and splitting it, and then being able to work on it as an array. You can go in either direction with this. All right. So that was, well, I didn't do the context, but the context is the context, really. All right. When I did the context for the program we're doing together, I just threw all the data in there. I'm going to ask that you tear it apart. There's only going to be 2 tables. I'm going to ask that you tear it apart and do these. Make your configuration files. All right. I'm forcing you to do much of the stuff that has been discussed in the book. All right. Okay. So next, let's jump in and let me close this. And let's look at the controllers. All right. And again, there are about 7 of them, I think, or 8 of them, doesn't matter. So in fact, let's start with a home controller, which again, doesn't have much in it. And again, we added the ability to come in here and route. All right. So that we can just, when we come in, you can just go to /about at the beginning. We talked about this before. All right. All right. Same kind of thing with the list in each one of these. All right. We added a route so that it's a shortcut when we come in here and you run the program that you don't have to put the name of the controller in /list. All right. So again, what are we doing in here? Like we typically do, we're coming in and we're doing dependency injection right there. All right. Then we've got our list where we're writing a fairly simplistic link query. All right. And we're telling it to give us all the customers and order them by last name. Then we come in, and I know this is all stuff we've looked at, just like what we've done in other applications that we've worked on. We've got an add and an edit here. Add to allow us to bring in a new customer, edit to allow us to edit an existing customer. And then we've got a save. All right. And what are we doing? Well, you'll notice in here, we start by saying, hey, did we set up a country? If it's XX, we didn't. So that's a model state error. We're kind of dead in the water right there. All right. If we get down to here, then what are we doing? Well, we're making sure we're seeing right now if this is a new customer. And if it is a new customer, we're seeing if their OK email thing is null. Okay, and as the comment says, only check on new customers, don't check on edit. So this is where we call that email exists to, again, make sure that we don't put in 2 customers who have the same email address. If we try to do that, another model state dot add model error. Once we get down to here, all right, now we can check to see if either we can insert a new customer or we can update an existing customer. Remember the word data that they're using in there, we typically use context. All right. But either way, whether it's an insert or an update, you save it and you redirect back to the list where they should be able to see the change. If the model state was not valid, all right, we let the view bag know if this is an add or an edit, and we return them back to the page they were at so they can hopefully fix their error. All right, then we've got a delete, where again, show the message, allow the user to delete. Once they delete, send them back to the list page so they can actually see the delete itself. All right, This, as it says here, was a get country list. And you'll notice it says private helper method. That said, okay, again, this is not my code. This is Muroc's code. I was always under the presumption that when you use a method, you've got to give it some kind of an access specifier, but you really don't. Because if you remember when we did our full name thing, we didn't do that either. So this is a private helper method. This is just a read-only method that they're putting in here. That's going to list all of the countries out. All right, we've got our incidents. And again, you will see some stuff in here that's going to be the same again in all of these. So again, we've got our dependency injection. We come in to do our list. And remember, we talked about this before, that I call the incident one kind of a wild card because it's combining information from 3 different tables. And we've got to check for a few things, such as, all right, if we're working on an incident, has it been assigned yet? All right. There's no technician. Is it open? There's no date closed. All right. And as you come down, as you'll notice, we got another helper method in here called get view model. What is that getting us? That's getting us the actual information, okay, on the incident. So it's letting us know who the customer is, what the product is, what technician has been assigned to it, etc. Right? My hope is when I look at this stuff this weekend, that most of you will either have this working or it's pretty close to be working. Now, if I go through this today and you look at it, let's say yourself today and or tomorrow or whenever, and you this weekend, you're like, I've got it now. I had errors before, then just turn it in. I probably will be grading it Sunday morning, to be honest with you. All right. So there's our add, there's our edit. And again, we've got to save, just like we had before. These aren't identical, of course, but the idea behind them, the logic behind them is pretty similar. And finally, our deletes. All right. And if we look, same kind of thing with product. All right. Again, our dependency injection, our list, our add, our edit, okay, our save, and our delete. All right. Registration. Okay. I know it sounds, this one is different. This is either getting a customer, as it says right there, or it's doing a list. Okay. So this is basically registering the incident. All right. Now, if any of you happen to be watching this and you're not Grant, so if you're watching this on a tape and you're like, oh, you whipped through that too fast, send me an email. All right. I'm trying to keep as much of it up here. So if you have to, you can stop the tape if you need to do so and take a look at what's in there. You know, as I wrote in the email a couple days ago, in many ways, this has kind of become the project from hell. All right. And a couple people have emailed me saying that they just can't believe how much time they've spent on this. That was not the intention. All right. And my hope is, you know, I mentioned to you what we'll be doing for the rest of the semester sometime in there. So sometime after we get back from Thanksgiving, we will do 15 and 16. I'll do them. You can do a code along or whatever you want. All right. I think 15 will probably be the harder one because we haven't really done much with making our own tag helpers. We are going to make a tag helper in the project that we work on. All right. But my hope is that most people will be able to do the authentication and authorization themselves, but we'll do it together anyway. I'm hoping you'll have a completed project for the Sports Pro that you can put out there, and for the project that we're going to be doing that you can put out there. All right. So our tech incident. And I even mentioned how, I don't know why they flipped these and did the post first and then they did. Why'd they do it? They did. I don't know. All right. And it's interesting. I may have told you guys this. Again, this is probably falls under the realm of one of those stories I'll tell you that you probably could care less about. But about 5 years ago, Muroc actually contacted me and asked me if I wanted to write a book for them. And I was going to write a C++ book. In fact, I had to talk to Mike Muroc, who runs the company. And it was interesting because I found out he was from Milwaukee. And when he found out I was from Milwaukee, it was even, kismet, and it was even sounding better. Well, what they wanted me to do was to write a chapter. And they wanted to check out my writing style, etc., see if they liked it. So I wrote a chapter and I sent it into them. They didn't like the way it was set up. They said it didn't match with their stuff. It did, but not enough. So I went back and did some rewrite, and then they liked it. And I thought, well, this is good. And they said, we'll get back to you. And I'm like, okay. So a week went by, 2 weeks went by, about a month went by, and I never heard anything. And I got an email from Mike saying that sales in the company were not what they had expected for that year. They had cut some of their workforce, and all they were going to keep to work on all their books were basically 6 authors, of which I was not going to be one. So they were going to write the book, but have somebody else do it. He thanked me for my time. I never asked to be paid for it. They never offered to pay me for it. So I did all that work for no reason, I guess. But it was interesting anyway. All right. So this was, again, the tech incident. And finally, the validation controller. Right, move this over a bit. There we go. This is where, again, we were working with a JSON in there. All right, so that's those. So we have quickly, and it was quick in the first hour here, we looked at everything in the data layer, everything in the models and the view models, and everything in the controllers. All right. Let's quickly, in the app setting.json, nothing in there. By now, that should make sense to everyone. All right. There shouldn't be anything that's in here, that's in here that's new for people. All right. You can, I think I mentioned this the other day. All right. In one of the programs that they had, they put this on the top before logging. The order in which you put this stuff doesn't matter, in other words. All right. And then this is theirs, so they've got both a program and a startup. I don't know why that is. All right. But this is where their services are. We know this. We've done this many times. All right. And they've only got one endpoint in here. All right. We're only going to have, I believe, in the project we do, one endpoint. All right. So I want to take a break. It's 1 o'clock and we come back. I'm going to start by going over everything in views. So we'll start, really, that's almost all that's left. And then I'll run it and we'll go through a couple things in there. It is 1 o'clock. Let's come back, please, at 1:15. I'll be back in a couple minutes.
Mr. Scott, could
Yes,
you
sir.
just leave open the Sports Pro unit? Maybe
Sports Pro unit. Yes, I will.
top it. I think that's where all of my remaining errors lie. So I was just
Gotcha.
gonna try to do a couple checks. Thank you.
Now let's see. Unfortunately, it's 69 lines long. Any special portion of
I
it?
have an error on each of inside that if statement.
Okay.
It's each one of those has the same error. So I think it's
So if
one
you can
thing.
find one, you might be able to find them all.
Yeah. So maybe just the top of the.
How about, is that good?
Can you scroll all the way up just to, I'm going to check the using statement or no
I
using
don't
statement.
have one.
All right. Thank you. Then just the top
Okay.
will be good.
All right. I said I'll be back in a couple minutes.
no longer believe in the third.
All right, it's 1:15, so let's continue on. Grant, did you figure out what your error was?
I was not able to, no.
Okay. Well, like I said, please put that out there, and that goes for anybody who is still having errors. Put it out there. I'm not guaranteeing I can find it, but I will be more than happy to look for it. So if you do that, put it out there and maybe just put a README file with it and just say where you're having your errors. I mean, I know
Okay.
I'll find them. I'll find them anyway, but just, just make it a little faster.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what's left then is let's start with our underscore layout. And you already all know this, that this can be done in a lot of different ways. All right. I actually went out and tried to do something new for the project, didn't like the way it looked at all, and went back and basically stole the the menu and the like that we have for the Sports Pro, and that's the one that I used in the project. So and we went through this in quite a bit of detail as a class as far as figuring out which one was active. We originally had all of them as active and then changed it, of course. All right. And then we've got our render body where we're putting everything. And we above that, we had the temp data, which would say something was deleted, something was updated, something was added, etc. View imports, nothing really. View start, of course, we've got those. So let's look at the regular view files. All right, and we will just do them in order. So let's start here with customer. And for all of those add edits, remember we added the section script at the beginning. All right. As you can see right here, this was our form. All right, for adding a new customer or editing an existing customer, basically. I think there's really anything, no surprises or anything like that in here. This was the thing in here where we had to come in and they wanted us to change this. All right. And they wanted basically to have a beginning entry that said select the country or select a something. All right, so we had to put that in and actually go in and create the new select list. Again, you'll notice the XX, and that's what we had checked for earlier. And we knew if we had that in there for a value, that it was set to here. So we had not selected a country. All right, again, like I said, I don't think there's anything else in there that's a surprise or anything. The delete, which is always the easiest. And our list, which we come in and that's where we set up a table. Okay, we've got our headers, we've got our body, and a for each, we go through and work our way through in here. For home, it was simpler because there's just the about, which again, virtually had nothing in it. And our index, this is what had our list group that was on the side, or we were able to choose, you know this already, we could choose either from the menu on top or from the list group that was on the side. Okay. Incident, again, with an add edit at the beginning, and this one had more than one, I think. Yeah. 2 or 3, I guess 3 select lists in here. Select the customer. Well, again, taking it from the top, we had in the add edit, we put in our section scripts. And by now, again, hopefully this is the kind of thing that makes sense. What the author had said in here was unless you are potentially changing the database, there's really no need to bring in the scripts that are doing validation. Because when you are doing a delete and when you're doing a list, all right, there's nothing to validate. Okay. So again, we had our select customer, followed by our select product. Finally, followed by our assign technician. I think there was one incident that did not have a technician assigned. All right. Again, the delete, which is, I got not much in it. And the list, which again, we came in here just like we set up the rest. Now, this is a little different as far as which one of these was active, etc., and how this was set up. Because again, remember with the incidents, we're dealing with 3 different tables in here. All right. And that's reflected in here as well. Incident.customer, incident.product, as opposed to just stuff that's in the incident table itself. All right. Product. Again, our section scripts. Don't think in here we didn't have any select lists. These were just the products. There were no drop downs. So the code, the name, the yearly price, and the release date. Our delete. And the list. Again, one thing hopefully you've been able to notice throughout this is not so much that things are repeated, but there are natural patterns that this stuff falls underneath. All right, this was getting our customer. So again, we've got a select list to get the customer. And then we've got our list. And finally, we've got technicians and our tech incident. Now there were, I want to check something. I'm going to run this in just a minute, but there are ways, I even think in their key that you can break this. And I'm going to see if I can break theirs by putting in something in just a bit. So here's our form. Edit, and there's our get and our list. And finally, again, with the technician in here. Now, I believe, like I said, I'm going to run it and see if I can break this. Everything works. I don't, when I say that, it does work, but what was that? Yeah, we can put multiple products in here, etc. That's checking. Yeah, it's already registered. Good. All right. But there was something in here when we were doing one of the lists. If you went and kind of circumvented what was supposed to happen, if you jumped to another page, all right. Now I wish I would have written it down because I broke it the other day when I ran it. This were those pills that they asked. So that's every incident, just the open ones. That's unassigned. There aren't any. Oh, it goes to the open ones. Okay, these are all the incidents. Now, I think if we come in here, yeah, it's been closed. And you'll notice that if we open it back up, and then we go to open incidents, it's now there. All right. Everything does work. Okay. What we will be getting into while we're doing the project and when we talk about the stuff that's in chapter 15, all right, is we're going to talk about, for example, partial views. And you already know what a partial view is. All right. The partial views are the ones that start with underscore. And the idea is they're meant to provide information that can be used in multiple areas of the program. We're going to have a couple areas of the program where we're going to share stuff. So we'll make our own partial view and we'll bring that information actually in to our program. All right, we'll also create our own tag helper. The one I got now is pretty simplistic. I found it, basing it on something I found online. All right, so we'll do that as well. And we'll talk a little bit about components. All right, so the plan is, again, that next week, starting Monday, and I won't even show you what it looks like right now, because the thing, I'll be working on it this weekend because there's a few things that have to be fixed on it. It's in 2 parts right now, but I'll show you what I've done. Now, what's supposed to happen when you run this is my logo. It's not very good, but I'm purposely not putting in a homepage. Why? Because I want you to do that. All right. And I'm not, don't get me wrong when I say this, I'm not being accusory of anybody. But one of the things I found out with the first year people this semester is when I give a test and I give them a demo of what it'll look like, half the class goes and makes like their homepage look just like mine. That's not what I want. But what we want to do in here is we got a list of different kinds of balls. This is supposed to be running across the screen. For some reason right now it's not. And if I choose one of these, you can see it blows it up and we get information about it. All right. So this is the kind of thing that you're going to be working on. All right. We're going to do this part of it together. Then I'm going to ask you to kind of throw it out, start it up yourselves. All right. And sell whatever product it is you want to sell. All right. This is only part of it. I've got the other part I've got in another project or another version of the project where we're going to literally have, this is going to be e-commerce where we're going to be able to add things in here. So there'll be a add to cart button on here. If you want to add one of these, you'll be able to. You can buy multiple ones. There'll be a tax rate, etc. So that's the plan for next week. And again, Grant, be it you or anyone else, if you're still having problems with your programs, all right, please send them to me. I promise to try to look at them already this afternoon and get back to you as soon as possible. With that, enjoy your 3-day weekend. I'll see you all Monday.
Thank you, you too.